us through every development that's happening there in Tel Aviv. Calev, very, very shortly, we will see the first images of the Prime Ministers, and we were discussing about how significant this particular visit and this pull aside that the Israeli Prime Minister is also going to be having right there at the airport, and you were mentioning that earlier. So before we see Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the screens, as the live shots have constantly been cut for our viewers, more on that part.
Yes, and I have to say, I can't really think of another world leader, certainly of the stature of Prime Minister Modi, that Prime Minister Netanyahu has such a warm rapport with on a personal level. The only other one I can think of, his relationship with President Trump is, of course, the most critical one for Israel, but that is a complicated relationship. But in terms of just the personal warmth between them, I would say Prime Minister Modi of India. The only other one I could really put in that category would be the president of Argentina, Javier Milei, who's also very supportive of Israel. But the special relationship that these two men have, it'll be interesting to see. I spoke earlier on your network about this. Last time when Prime Minister Modi was here, they took, I think, an unscheduled trip to the beach. And we had these, I would say, iconic images of the two leaders actually there on the surf in Tel Aviv by themselves there on the beach. And that was kind of unprecedented, unscripted moment.
So are we expecting those leisurely photo ops in this particular trip of his as well? Because we constantly are talking about how historic this becomes. He becomes the first Indian Prime Minister to ever address the Israeli parliament. So while we're talking about those historic firsts, one must also talk about the kind of camaraderie that the two leaders share, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Right. I think it's going to be a little more difficult in this visit for those kind of moments because, as your other guest said, it's a very tight schedule, basically just 24 hours. It's packed from 1 minute to the next. We're going to go straight from here to the airport, to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. Again, very unusual for a foreign leader to address the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. President Trump, most recently, the only leaders that got that honor were President Trump. Of course, when the Gaza war ended, and the president of Argentina, I mentioned, Javier Milei, also getting that honor. So very unusual. From there, they're going to go to an innovation fair at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. So it's the dinner in the King David, more meetings tomorrow. So it is a very packed schedule. But we'll have to see. Both of these leaders are given to sort of spontaneous, sometimes unscripted moments. I know Prime Minister Modi especially. So perhaps we will see something like that.
All right. So let me, on that note, get in a word from our colleague Sanjay Suri, who is in fact with us from Jerusalem. And Sanjay, it's just about an hour from now on, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be landing in Jerusalem. And that's where that historic address really happens. Is he going to mention Iran? Because we've been constantly talking about this hexagonal alliance, which has been, in fact, spoken of right ahead of that visit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Do you think that historic address will see the Prime Minister also making a mention of Iran?
You know, I have very poor credentials to second guess what the Indian Prime Minister is going to say, but it is unlikely.
Right. While you make that point, Sanjay, let me also, in fact, put out these visuals for our viewers. We do see the Israeli Prime Minister pretty much there at the red carpet along with his wife. So very shortly, we will see Prime Minister Narendra Modi descending from that aircraft as Benjamin Netanyahu has marked his position there. So he is going to be there greeting the Indian Prime Minister as he lands. And those visuals coming to us very shortly. There is the Israeli and Indian flag that we see in the foreground, and the Israeli Prime Minister along with his wife also there, all set to meet with the Indian Prime Minister. So shortly we will see that expected warm embrace between the two leaders. Let's take a look at what is happening there at the Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv.
המשמר יציג את נשקו. המשמר יחטיף את נשקו. החטף, שקט! המשמר יחטיף את נשקו. החטף, שקט! עמוד תנועה. המשמר יציג את נשקו. הצא, צ'ק! המשמר יעבור לנוח, עמוד נוח.
So the second visit of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, very shortly you will see him on your screens, and there you see climbing onto the stairs for that big meeting with the Indian Prime Minister. We'll possibly see that the first images of the Prime Minister shortly, and we're also being told that this flight that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken to come to Israel has been the most tracked worldwide. An interesting fact that we also want to put out for our viewers, and that's how significant and how much of a chatter around this trip of Prime Minister Narendra Modi is really to Israel is globally, and that is something that one must also look at. You see the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu waiting for that arrival, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi very shortly, within the next few seconds, you'd see him at the door and then descending down the stairs. So a trip that is being touted to be rather historic, a second one by the Indian Prime Minister. First time ever an Indian Prime Minister is going to be addressing the Israeli Parliament, and all of this amid only chants and love for Bharat. And there you see Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He has arrived in Tel Aviv with a namaste, is how he's choosing to greet everybody waiting there, including the Israeli Prime Minister.
המשמר יעבור לדום. משמר, דום!
You see what you want? Look at the color.
Ellie.
He's a wonderful leader. Welcome. We have a lot to go. We're going here.
Opa.
לראות שלומי, לראות שידור חי פה.
It's like a tank.
We will look now to the salute line for Prime Minister
החטף, צ'ק! המשמר ידגל את נשקו. דגל, צ'ק!
המשמר יחטיף את נשקו. החטף, צ'ק!
אדוני ראש הממשלה, משמר כבוד של חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל ערוך ונכון לסקירתך. אדוני.
All right, so the personal touch is for all to see as heartwarming visuals, rather unprecedented visuals coming in from the Ben Gurion airport. As you can see, breaking away from protocol, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, accompanied by the First Lady, in fact, Sarah Netanyahu, where she also complimented Prime Minister, and Prime Minister, in fact, also touched upon the color connect between Sarah Netanyahu and Prime Minister Modi, talking about the saffron that both of them are wearing. Much can be read between the lines as far as that color and the deep-rooted symbolism of that color is concerned. Tracking all the latest and live details from ground is Sanjay Suri in Tel Aviv. I'm also joined in by our guests over here, who I will be going to in just a bit. But let me quickly bring in Sanjay for the latest ground details. Sanjay, heartwarming visuals, absolutely. The color was specifically mentioned by Prime Minister Modi to Sarah Netanyahu. What is one to make of this mention at the moment?
Well, the symbolism is there for us all to see, and we know that there are very warm relations between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Modi. There is a certain political outlook that is shared. There is a certain country situation that Israel is in, that India is in, and we all see the commonalities there. But certainly the visit now is underway, and it will seek to take ties between the two countries to a new level, and that's a sort of an expression we often hear when leaders meet. But this time we have very specific information and indicators that a lot is on the agenda that is very specific, that we will see unravel over the next 2 days, and then again we will see the consequences of that to follow in good course. So this is a visit that's set to firm up ties between India and Israel to a whole new level.
All right, stay with me. I'm also joined in by Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, Tara Karta, former director, NSCS, and Major General Bishambir Dayal, who's a defense expert as well. Many thanks to all of you for joining in. Ambassador Sajjanhar, if I could quickly bring you in, as somebody who's been tracking how this relationship has in fact built. Many say that diplomacy is also a result of the personal rapport and the bonhomie that leaders share. And that's exactly what's on display right now at the Ben Gurion airport. What's been your assessment in terms of how this bilateral relationship and the bonhomie between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu has grown in the past decade?
Yes, thank you very much, Akansha, for having me. You're very right. I think when it is the personal rapport between the two leaders, it definitely acts as a catalyst or as a lubricant as far as the bilateral partnership is concerned. But underlying all that are national interests, and both the countries realize it. You know, meaning why did it take India, an Indian Prime Minister, 25 years after the establishment of diplomatic relations in 1992 to make the first visit to Israel? So it was definitely, there was some national interest which were perceived by the leadership in India at that time. But when Prime Minister Modi came, he decided to de-hyphenate the relationship with Israel and with Palestine. So while he visited Israel in 2017, as I said, 25 years after establishment of diplomatic relations, he was one of the very few leaders to have also traveled to Ramallah in 2018. So he did not hyphenate. It is not as if he's going to Israel now and Palestine along with it, so that, you know, there is an equivalence, there is a balance between the two. Not at all. He is taking it one by one. And then if I could come, if you permit, if I come to the present visit, meaning this also, the time for Israel is not a very happy one, because it has really been pushed into a corner. It's really been converted into a pariah state as far as the world is concerned.
All right.
You know, barring the United States, you look at Europe, you look at China, you look at Russia, you look at even prominent members of the global south, whether it is Brazil or it is South Africa. You know, they have all been railing against what Israel has been doing in Gaza in terms of the violence that has been perpetrated, in terms of the number of killings that have. But Prime Minister Modi, notwithstanding all that, and we have excellent relations with Brazil. We know that President Lula was in town just a few days ago.
This indeed is also a moment to celebrate India's strategic autonomy. And that's why I quickly want to go across to one of my very interesting friends. I'm joined in by Caleb Ben David, who's an anchor at ILTV News, is joining me live on the broadcast as well. Caleb, thank you for joining in. Pleasure to have you here on CNN News 18. Heartwarming visuals of Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu meeting, along with Sarah Netanyahu. The interesting part over here is that both have a common connect, and that is the color saffron, something that Prime Minister Modi also spoke about. If we talk about the common connect right now, apart from the color saffron, what are the commonalities that unite Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Modi?
I think there are very close political connections between the two. Both leaders are seen as perhaps being more assertive about national pride in their countries. They both draw on the traditional heritage, even religious heritages of their countries. Of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu with the Jewish heritage of Israel, and Prime Minister Modi, the Hindu heritage of India. So they both occupy, in some ways, sort of the same aspect. They both are leaders who are trying to build regional alliances against, for example, the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, which is something that unites them, and I'm being more assertive about it than for perhaps some other world leaders. In fact, I would even say part of this visit today is why it's so important for Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu is Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu politically trying to pivot Israel perhaps away somewhat from Europe, where Israel has been strongly connected with, and of course many of the European nations, as your previous guest just said, were very critical of Israel over the war in Gaza, and perhaps pivoting more towards Asia, in particularly towards India. So I think you have two leaders really cut from the same mold here, perhaps in some ways a little controversial in sort of the world political stage, but certainly you could see a lot of similarities. It was no coincidence that Sarah Netanyahu, who is very much they're a team. We should say this. It's not usual in world leaders, but the Prime Minister's wife always accompanies him on official trips and in gatherings like this. No coincidence she wore that saffron color. She was sending a message of solidarity, not just with India, but with Prime Minister Modi and, of course, his political party especially. So there is definitely a connection here.
Absolutely.
Such a strong
and
connection.
I'm sure you'll agree that the color is the symbolism of the commonalities that both the countries share, both the leaders share, which is why I want to quickly bring in Major General Dayal also on that note. Major General Dayal, as we speak, just hours ago, a joint working group meet on counter-terrorism between the Indian and the Israeli side concluded. Terrorism is one issue that both countries have borne the brunt of. How do you think India and Israel can not just stand in solidarity, but work towards eliminating the menace of terrorism after October 7 and after Pahalgam especially?
Thank you, Akanksha. Let me just give you a little bit background to coming to terrorism. You see, it's the timing which is most important, as everybody is bringing out, but it is not only the standoff between US and Iran today and involvement of Israel directly, and also not what is happening in West Bank and what pending issue of the Gaza. But today you must understand that last year there have been two very strategic agreements in this region. West Asia has got 4 major military powers after the degradation of Iraq and Syria. And these are Israel, Iran, Saudi Arabia. These are 3, and Turkey, which is Eurasia or Asia, Turkey, which is part of it. Last year, Pak China has had an agreement with Saudi Arabia. Last year, Pak China has an agreement with Turkey, and there is a trilateral with Azerbaijan. In this context, when you look at it, then, like Mr. Sajjanar said, somewhere Israel was lone. Somewhere India needs its strategic partnership to be upgraded. Terrorism is very, I would say today, terrorism is on the wane across the world. Even here, if you see, the terrorism in our valley, the militancy is not what it was in 90s or what was it in the early 2000s. So there we have succeeded already. We have got information exchange mechanism. We have got, the key terrorists, we identify both the countries. We have got already a setup which will only be upgraded. So terrorism jointly, I think in there, America also plays a part in it. So that's a very little part of its achievement. Right. The main thing is, important is the signaling and messaging at this time. This is the most important part. We are sending a message to a number of countries. This visit by the head of state of India, by the Prime Minister of India, is sending a very, very different message which will have a deeper implication.
In fact, the message was sent out during Operation Sindoor as well. Tarak Artha, would you like to weigh in on that? Because much of intel sharing happened between India and Israel, which helped India successfully eliminate those terror camps in Pakistan. And if we were to weigh in on the messaging part of this, take it forward when we talk about how India and Israel are looking towards forging this strategic partnership, rather strengthening it further.
I think the main messaging has come across from the news I just saw, that Pakistan Senate has passed a resolution against the India's visit, India and Israel coming together. So they are obviously very upset about that. The terrorism connect is very real because, for Israel, it is a daily problem. They've suffered from this for decades, and we've also suffered. So that empathy between the two countries on the costs which has been imposed on us due to terrorism is very, very real. And I've seen this. post Sindoor, of course, our own cooperation has gone up. The kind of systems that we rely on are Israeli. I mean, much of those things, spice, all of that is Israeli weapon systems. So we need these now as soon as possible, because I would marginally disagree. I don't think terrorism is over at all. True, it's not over. It is going to, one second.
In fact, it's evolving.
Yes, you're going to see new forms of it, so we need all the help we can get.
I think that's a very critical point Tara has just now made. Kalev, would you like to weigh in on that? How does one tackle terrorism in an age when we are seeing it evolve daily? Because it's also taking forms of, say, cyber forms, where we are looking at times when cyber terrorism is happening. Here in India, we are talking about or dealing with the menace of how hiring is happening online as well. So here you're looking at even intel sharing, which will play a very critical role. How will India and Israel look towards eliminating terror infrastructure, address the menace of money laundering? And we cannot do it without, say, European powers like France and the FATF, which must call out the role that's being played by countries like Pakistan, which are a safe haven for terrorists.
Well, let me bring up another point about Pakistan, because we have seen in recent years a growing alliance, in particular between Pakistan and Turkey. This is a sort of access of a hardline, may say Sunni, a Muslim alliance, trying also to bring in Saudi Arabia. And we saw Turkey has increasingly aided Pakistan, including during Operation Sindoor, and really the building up the India-Israeli alliance is a sort of counter to that. And of course, there is an ambition to increase this beyond in the region, among more moderate states and beyond even. So that's one crucial aspect. And as your other guest mentioned, Israeli technology, certainly air defense technology, was very important during Operation Sindoor, showed how important air defense, basically that's the game now in security. And of course, Israel is a world leader in that. It's developing, had developed the Barak 8 with India. So along with perhaps providing India with air defense systems like those, it's going to work with India to develop new ones, and that is a crucial aspect of it.
Kalev, there's a lot of curiosity. There's so much to talk about. There's a lot of curiosity about the Hexagon alliance here in India. Could you also shed light on why should India even be part of this alliance? Whether or not India decides to be part of this alliance is yet unknown, but what will India stand to gain if it were to join the Hexagon?
Look, we are in a situation where the region is changing rapidly, and we've seen states like Syria move from one orbit. They were in the Iranian orbit, and they moved now. They seem to be moving in the Turkish orbit. It is not simply countries cannot simply stand on their own anymore. It is about building regional alliances, and even beyond that. And you even have just said, I noticed the threat of the cyber warfare, money laundering. These are aspects of, for example, terrorism that go beyond national borders, even go beyond regional borders, and the bad players are emerged. So it is very crucial to build these kind of, again, multinational alliances. We may see in the coming months people are talking about a new NATO for the Middle East, for example, that even Israel could be a part of and include more moderate Arab states. India is going to have to be a part of these alliances. Now, it is a little tricky because you mentioned, I will say earlier, you talked about Iran, which is a point of disagreement between Israel and India.
Yes.
You talked about whether Prime Minister Modi would address that, for example, in the case. Personally, I don't think, I would be very surprised if there's any public statements about that.
Sure.
Because keep in mind, this is now the U.S. and President Trump who is driving the situation and strategy with Iran, not Israel. It's President Trump, and certainly Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu are going to want to respect that role and not deal it. But you can be sure that behind closed doors, and maybe even now there at the airport, first thing Prime Minister Modi is going to want to hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu was what is the latest that he knows on the situation with Iran, because we may be
Fascinating
seeing a conflict
observations,
here
Caleb.
in the next
Thank
couple
you.
of days.
Thank you. Stay with me because I want to quickly give closing thoughts to Sanjay. Also, Sanjay, Prime Minister Modi all set to make that address in the Knesset. We all can't wait to hear from Prime Minister. But many here in India from the Parliamentary Committee have also gone on to talk about the messaging. They have questioned the timing of this visit. What is the message overall for India's broader Middle East policy?
You know, fundamentally, the question is whether India can serve the Palestinian cause by compromising its defense position with Pakistan. It cannot. That is today India's own security is paramount necessarily and obviously to India. Israel is a critical partner for India. Israeli technology, Israeli weapon systems are critical for Indian defense. At the same time, Israel is a relatively isolated nation. It's not able to do business with a lot of countries that really have closed doors to Israel, and therefore it suits both people. Necessarily without mutual interest, we wouldn't have come as far as we have. But really these are separate tracks, and there will be questions raised about this visit inevitably, but this is a separate track. It is driven by security, it is driven by defense concerns, and so it must be.
Absolutely. The testament to that alliance is very much visible from the kind of bonhomie that we've seen between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and of course the colours worn by Prime Minister and Sarah Netanyahu. Caleb Ben David, here's a very special thank you to you for joining in on CNN News 18 and sharing in your fascinating insights with us here. Israel. Many thanks to our guests also for joining in live from the studios of CNN News 18. That's all I have for you in this broadcast. Thank you so much for watching.